Are you ready?
I still love it.
I love that.
I do.
I didn't realize how like hard rock it is.
It's hard rock.
It keeps growing on me more and more.
Well, that's because we're rocking.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah, we're rocking. So, well, hello everybody, and welcome to the Parishscope. This is the podcast, the extension of the newsletter of St. John's Lutheran Church in Sam Prairie in Green Valley, Illinois. I'm Pastor Chris Hansen.
And I'm Casey Doremus. I'm the creative worship director at Our Savior Lutheran.
All right. So, well, I mean, let's jump right in. We got a lot to do. Of course, because we added a new segment, and I gotta kind of do that segment.
That's right.
Although
committed.
this guy, I'm committed now. But I don't know. This guy's got a kind of an odd last name. So like I'm like I forgot to kind of look up exactly how it's pronounced. So
right.
We'll burn that bridge when we get there. Oh wait, no, we're gonna cross that bridge. We're gonna cross.
Right.
Well, there's a country song that he talks about burning the bridge, and that's always stuck with me, and so then I always end up getting it wrong.
Yeah.
So anyway, again, we could talk about any top news story, this, that, and it's all like political, blah 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 blah.
Right.
I just feel like there's just so many politics out there.
Yeah.
However, I was reading through, and I was at the ChristianPost.com, and that's where I was kind of looking at some of the various stories, and one of them like actually caught my interest, and it was talking about how there are some groups that are kind of gaining steam that are really good at. They want to create kind of a Christian nationalism, and if you've been around a little bit, you know that this is kind of a word or a term or a phrase that kind of gets thrown around a lot, especially with Christians. Kind of the assumption is that they want to nationalize the church. They want to make America not just a free nation, but in fact a Christian nation with mandated Christianity.
Oh, like people have to go to church?
Yeah, like you have to be Christian. Like you have to be Christian.
What? Okay. That's a kind of, see, I don't know. That's funny. I mean, obviously we both are Christians.
Yes.
And we both feel that is a very positive. I mean, I think you'd agree. That's a great way to live your life.
Yeah.
But I mean, God gave us free will. And so that's kind of, I don't know. It's just funny to me because it would be great, but forcing someone to go to church against their will, I don't think that's going to necessarily do the right thing for them. I don't know. I mean,
yeah. Well, again, this is where it gets a little dicey. Like, because first of all, I didn't like look up some of his sources.
Right.
I read through the article. The article is actually fairly interesting. I didn't look up necessarily his sources, so I don't know how much steam these are really getting.
Yeah.
I know it's an accusation that a lot of times people that are more on the left, on the more liberal side, tend to accuse the Republicans of in terms of being Christian nationalist and so on and so forth. I personally don't see it. But again, this particular article was basically saying, hey, some of this is actually gaining some steam, to which I would say, yeah, honestly, like, I think that's a bad idea. Now, again, just to put it in context, almost every nation used to have a kind of mandated faith that went with it.
Mm-hmm.
We were a Christian nation or a Muslim nation or a Greek nation and had our Greek gods and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of history that kind of goes with this. But one of the things that I think that ends up coming out of it that I really don't like, and this is something that I do kind of understand, this is like poor theology that just happens. And that is that basically a certain belief kind of comes around that basically says, well, our nation, whether it goes up or down, is going to be based on how faithful we are as Christians. And so if we're Christians and we're really, really faithful Christians, then God will bless us and our militaries will succeed and we will defeat the whatever, who's out there. and yada yada yada, and everything's going to go really well. It almost becomes like the nation almost becomes like this mega church that's into the prosperity gospel, like big
Yeah.
time, you know.
Yeah.
And so that's not quite the way that works. Now, again, part of this is because what they do is they actually bring a lot of stuff from the Old Testament, and they start looking at it and they go, well, you see, this is what God says, here in the book of Isaiah or in the book of Jeremiah, and so on and so forth. And the problem with that is that the Old Testament really is all about land theology. And it's all
Mhm.
about, the Israelites heading to the promised land, getting to the promised land. They're staying in the promised land, or God's punishing them for their unfaithfulness and they're being kicked out of the promised land or whatever. And so a lot of it has to do with the promised land. The
Yeah.
problem is that those same promises are not given to us.
Oh.
Yeah, so we look forward to the new heavens and the new earth. We look forward to the day that we'll be with Christ Jesus, and we will be with God for all of eternity. So we certainly look forward to those things.
Mhm.
But that being said, that is not the same thing as America. I really hope America is not heaven. That would be awful. I love my country. I think it's the greatest country, but you know what? The greatest country is still nothing compared to the new heavens and new earth that I look forward to in the days to come.
Right.
So,
Yeah. I mean, I'm glad we at least have Burger King around here, but that's still not
yeah, it's
heaven.
not heaven.
Yeah.
I mean, again,
Unfortunately.
yeah, I mean, Burger King is awesome,
Yeah.
but
I mean, for sure.
not heaven. Not
Yeah.
you know,
So that's really interesting because I feel like I do hear people say that a lot, kind of like, well, if we do, like if we stay a Christian nation, like if our president's Christian, if we're protecting Israel,
yeah.
um, all those things, then like we're gonna, that's why we're gonna be so successful as a country and all this stuff because we're following God's plan. But you're saying like that's not really what God has promised us,
Yeah,
like as
that's not a
Americans.
promise. That's not a promise for us. I mean,
Hmm.
I mean, again, don't get me wrong. Like some of God's promise just has have almost like a, dare I say, a natural consequence to them.
Yeah.
Again, if you steal a bunch, more than likely your life is going to be pretty miserable. You know,
Hmm.
um, because while you'll steal this, that, and the next thing, eventually you're going to get caught and then you're in jail and yada yada yada, or somebody catches you and hurts you, harms you, kills you, whatever. So your life is probably not going to be the greatest if that's what you do, if you continue to steal and so on and so forth.
Hmm.
But that being said, um, the promises that God made to Israel for the promised land are not the same that he gives to us.
Yeah.
So, we could
Gosh.
be incredibly faithful and still suffer. And in fact, I mean, look at it this way. Like, when Jesus is talking to the disciples, toward the end, toward the time when he was going to ascend into heaven, he tells them, hey, people are gonna hurt you because of me. They're gonna persecute you. You're going to
Yeah.
suffer because of me. Like, that doesn't sound like, hey, if you guys are just really faithful, everything's gonna go good for you. you
Yeah.
know Again,
Yeah.
it almost becomes this idea that, like, it's almost like the nation becomes a form of the prosperity gospel.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's where all things kind of go haywire. They go wrong.
Yeah. That's very interesting. I guess I've never thought about. I mean, I don't. I mean, I guess I have thought about it to a degree, but I didn't know how in depth it really was because you know Jesus obviously changes everything,
Hmm.
but I never thought about the fact of some of the things that were happening in the Old Testament maybe don't actually apply to us in a certain way.
Yes.
Um, that's really interesting. I wonder what other things. I wonder if there's like a list of other things that are sort of like
Oh, dude, there's
people
tons.
misconstrue it. Yeah, I'm
There's
sure.
we should do a segment like that, like most misused text of all times, right? Like,
Yeah.
because there's a bunch of them. There really are.
Hmm.
There's a bunch of text that get used and abused all the time by well-meaning people. Like, and again, I don't want to make it sound like these people are evil or something like that. They're not evil. They're
Yeah.
well-meaning people. They're good people. but they don't understand the kind of the hidden theology that stands behind what they're saying, what they're doing, and so on and so forth. So, um, and so, yeah. As a Christian nation, we can be a Christian nation, so to speak, as in to say we have an overwhelming majority of people that are Christian.
Mm-hmm.
But the well-being of our nation is not necessarily determined based on how faithful or unfaithful we are as Christians. Now, again, don't get me wrong, right? There's some things that have just natural consequences. Like when you abandon Christianity, you also might abandon some of those other principles that are kind of go with it. Such as
Yeah.
things like stealing or murder or hurting or harming your neighbor and so on and so forth. Like all those things kind of go away too. And then in that regard, does society kind of fall apart, and does it kind of have a natural consequence of bad things? Well, a lot of times, yeah,
Yeah.
but not always. You know,
Yeah.
sometimes the nation ends up doing really, really well, and they're not Christian at all.
Mm-hmm.
So, but again,
That's true.
it's just one of those things. It's pretty important to kind of keep in mind, kind of as we go.
Yeah.
So,
You know, that's when you said there's nations that aren't Christian that, are flourishing or they have moments of, you know, uh, doing well. I heard something the other day, and I wonder what your thought on this is, because I never have thought about this. That someone said, I heard someone talking about how, um, something along the lines. I can't remember what sparked this comment, but something about somebody who, well, they're not a Christian, but they're a good person or something, and they said people get it wrong that the devil doesn't like good manners and well behaved people. The devil doesn't like Christ, and that was I wonder what your thoughts on that. As in, like, he's okay if you're someone who doesn't steal, as long as you don't follow God. Like, he doesn't really care. Like, if you steal or you do drugs or whatever, that's not really the devil's. Uh, that's not what he is. His objective is. It's like, if that stuff will pull you away from God, great. But he's more focused on you not being following Jesus. I don't. Does that reign true to you, or is
yeah,
that
yeah,
just
yeah.
sound like kind of a?
No, actually, it really does. I mean, again, the devil's main goal is to pull you away from Christ Jesus.
Mhm.
That is his main goal, and he will do it however he can. If drugs, then drugs. If stealing, then stealing. If pornography, then pornography. Whatever he can get his hands on, so to speak,
Yeah.
to use to pull you away from Christ Jesus, that's what he's going to do. The high
And,
schoolers and I
and
actually right now are doing a Jonathan Fisk book. Jonathan Fisk is a semi well known pastor. He's in the Missouri Synod. Um, he gained some popularity by doing a Worldview Everlasting video blog, years and years and years ago.
yeah.
He's a year older than me. It was really funny. Like in the high school class, I actually showed a video from like 12 years ago.
Oh yeah.
And, it was right after he wrote the book, and all the kids were like, dude, he looks like he's 16. And I'm like, yeah, he was kind of young. Like he was in his 30s, I think, when he wrote the book, but it was still like
Right. Yeah.
he just looked incredibly young.
Yeah.
Um, but one of the things of the book is it's talking about as it says, the seven, Christian, and Christian is in parentheses, the seven Christian rules that every Christian should break as often as they can. And basically what he's doing is he's going through some of these like false things that have like kind of inserted themselves into the church. And one of the things that he keeps bringing home, and I think this is very true, is like these are all things that the devil uses to rip people away from Christ Jesus.
Right.
And so I'll give you an example. Like the first one is you know never follow a church that follows your some bodily organ, like your heart, your liver, your lung, your eye, or whatever.
Right.
And so that's the rule, and it's written in kind of a fun way, catchy way, so to speak. But the point is still there. Like what he's saying is like, there's churches out there that you almost have to feel something. And it's like, if you don't feel something, then God might not be with you, or God doesn't love you, or maybe you really don't have faith because you don't feel certain things. And so, the idea is that, like, well, if you start just feeling, if you just start following your quote unquote emotions,
Hmm.
well, you're going to be led to a very dark place,
Yeah.
because your emotions are all over the place. And not
Oh
only
yeah.
that, like, it's not like Christians have the corner on emotions, like, other faiths, other religions have emotions.
Yeah.
And so, like, basically, hey, don't go to a church that relies only on your emotions, only on, whatever it happens to be, to do that. Not now, here's the thing though, here's the kicker. It's not saying that those things are bad. It's simply saying you don't want to rely on those. So your faith is not based on how the clouds look today or how you feel in a certain way.
Right.
Now, that being said, God gave us feelings. So feelings are a good thing. Nothing wrong with that. But when you
Yeah.
put your faith in that, and see, that's the trick of the devil, right? Like he says, "Oh, no, put your faith in that." And
Yeah.
no, so once you start putting your faith in that, like, oh man, he can just there's all kinds of horrible things that he can do. And so,
Yeah.
like, yeah, you got like 7 rules, like, that he's kind of saying, hey, you need to break these, and some of
Hmm.
them are like really popular, views, really popular, rules. But again, the devil works his way in and says, oh yeah, just do this. And it's like you see this kind of stuff in churches all over the place,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. It's always interesting to me when you hear somebody like a comedian or somebody who, they'll if there's someone who used to be a Christian and now they're an atheist or whatever, the story they always kind of tell you, they always, tell this story about how, they were just in some situation and then they just realized like, oh, well, I'm upset. And I mean, they don't say it that way, but it's like they're upset, something tragic happened, and then they just go, oh, well, I just realized how stupid it was to believe in God. And it's
Mhm.
kind of like this one moment you're upset and you didn't even, they didn't take time to think, okay, I need to understand this, or I need to figure out why this happened,
Yeah,
or, they just kind of decide right then and there, I'm upset, this is dumb, I'm over it.
yeah.
And it,
And so
it's
you're
just,
left asking, okay, what did they really put their faith in? You know?
yeah, yeah, we've talked about that too, about like, and I probably a long time ago we talked about this on the podcast, but about how, people who become atheists because, and they blame it on like, well, there was this elder and he was a
Yeah,
real jerk
yeah,
and and I couldn't believe that he like cheated on his wife. And it's like, but who are you believing in the elder? Are you believing in
yeah,
Jesus?
yeah,
Like,
right?
the elder isn't, you know, and now, sorry, I'm going off on a tangent now,
No, it's
but this
fine.
is one of the things I've thought about. We've done this the last couple of weeks, like brought up some posts that people have been doing online,
Yeah.
and
Although I will admit, like, if you were paying attention, like last week it got cut off. Like,
oh, that's right, yeah,
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 that's right. We lost like half the podcast.
right.
So
So
I signed in the next day and I'm like, oh no, it's gone.
yeah.
Oh man.
Well, yeah, so we've kind of gone over some of these that are people who or just posts that people have been saying that are kind of like, well, if you were really a Christian, you would believe this political thing instead of this
Yeah.
political thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or they go into these things. And one of the things I see a lot are people really going after the church and trying to say like how broken it is.
Hmm.
And the thing is, the more I've thought about it and the more I'm contemplating, I'm thinking, well, yeah, of course the church is broken. We're all sinners.
Yep.
None of us are perfect, and so of course a church is not going to be perfect. There's no I don't think it's humanly possible for the church to never have drama, or the church to never have somebody in the church who's being judgmental of the person singing, or the person, doing the slides, or whatever it is. It's like there's always somebody who's going to have an opinion about something, and it's because we're not perfect.
Yeah.
And then also I thought about this actually, like today, is that not only are we not perfect, but we're praying to God and asking him for stuff. Like we're saying, make me a strong husband. Well, then God puts you in a situation to prove to yourself that you can be a strong husband,
Yeah.
or whatever it is. And sometimes people are in these trials and they maybe aren't doing well, you know,
Yeah.
Maybe they didn't succeed the first time.
Yeah.
And so it's like, not only are people not perfect, but God's also testing them and or putting them through these things that they want, uh or these trials to become who they want to be. And so all around, it's like we just have a recipe for disaster, really, because it's just, the church is not going to be perfect, unfortunately. And so the people who go from church to church to church because, well, this one thing happened, it really upset me, so I had to leave. And I do understand to a degree, because I have, I don't go to the same church that I grew up going to.
Yeah.
But sometimes you have to stop and think, okay, is this something I can get through? Can I deal with this problem, before just trying to find a different church? And then in, 2 years have the same issue come up with something else that upsets me, you
Yeah.
know. But I don't know. I really, it's just so interesting to me that I see all these posts lately that are just really going after the fact that these church people are hypocrites. And it's like, well, of course they are. Of course we all are. We're not perfect, unfortunately. We want to be, but we aren't.
Yeah. Exactly.
But, yeah.
Exactly. But yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think look, there are going to be some people that get burned by the church, and I'm I'm not going to say that there are not. But you're right. You need to do some soul searching very well. See where your faith is, and yeah, again, take some time to heal by all means, but go to a different church while you do. And
Yeah.
and then once you're ready, maybe come back and kind of talk it through. And who knows, I always say, like, in my experience, I've also found that a lot of people just, we take a lot of things at surface level, and I think it's actually getting worse, but again, I'm not going to comment on that. But like,
Yeah.
we take things so much at surface level, and we rarely dig deeper and say, okay, what's like really kind of going on here. And I think sometimes we need to do that, because again, I think what you'll find is that the church is made up of all kinds of sinners. And you're
Yeah.
right, absolutely. Who knows what was going on? That one guy burned you. Like, well, okay, but what was going on in his world? Like,
Yeah.
maybe he snapped, but why? So
Yeah. Yeah. And, I just think about, I don't know, I think about that with certain people that, I don't know, now I'm rambling a little bit, but it's just, we, the whole idea of God is not going to, you can't say, I want to be this, and God can't, he's not going to snap his fingers and you're just going to become, if I say, I want to be good at math, I'm not just magically good at math because I prayed.
yeah,
Maybe God will send me a really great teacher or
yeah,
something, or he'll put, I'll have to take tests, and if I really want it, I got to work at it.
yeah.
And,
And
but
this is actually a good thing to talk about, like, in terms of, like, what can God do versus how God typically works.
yeah,
You know what I mean? Like sometimes we get into the middle of that, and it's like, well, can God snap his fingers and make you good at math? Well, of course he can. He's
yeah,
God. He is the Almighty. He can do whatever he wants.
hmm,
Um, he can absolutely snap his fingers and make you good at math. However, that is not typically how he operates. He typically works through means,
hmm,
and through those means, such as a math teacher, or even our own struggle and strife, we kind of grow and learn, and so on and so forth. And it's like, so that's just typically the way God works. You
hmm,
know, Again, we kind of talk about this when we talk about baptism, right? We say, we look at baptism and we say, okay, um, can God just snap his fingers and save somebody? Well, sure, he can,
yeah,
but he usually works through means, and he kind of says, hey, I'm going to work through baptism. And so, yeah,
yeah. It's I don't know. It's just really, it's interesting to me, and it's just the thought of how hard it is to actually run a perfect church. It has been kind of on my mind recently,
yeah,
just
it
because I
can't
see
be
so many
done.
posts. Yeah, it's impossible, but we try to strive for it, but it's just like, yeah, it's never good. You're always going to come up short. Yeah. So it's just hard. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I always, I I don't want to say I always tell people, but I kind of started to, didn't I? I was like, oh, I always tell everybody, but like there is something to be said. Like, you know, when you get to a church, find, by all means, find one that you like. But
Yeah.
once you find one that you like, kind of say to yourself, I'm going to give this church 1 year, right? And I don't
Yeah.
mean to say like, oh, it's a probationary period, but what I mean is if you find out that so and so irritates you or upsets you, or all of a sudden the pastor's preaching is just super boring, or the Bible class isn't quite what you want, man, just tough it out. Just tough it out for a full year
Mm-hmm.
and do that. And after that year, really, really reflect on it. And I think one of the things that you will, by the way, I am a firm believer, like you should go just jump in, like to
Mm-hmm.
to the best that you can, like, you know, both feet, both feet forward, just jump, get
Yeah.
involved, be on a committee, do this, do that. And what you will find is that there's a lot of stuff going on at the church, but also, no matter what it is, a lot of times you'll find out a lot of stuff as you go, and you'll actually grow.
Yeah.
Because it's just like eating vegetables. Like, not everybody likes to eat vegetables, but yet they're healthy and they're good for you. Like,
Right.
if all we ever do is stuff that we like to do, that we want to do, that's fun, then that's a pretty poor example of a church. Like,
Yeah.
your church should push you a little bit, and when you get pushed, it's not usually fun. Like,
Mm-hmm.
whenever you're in a sport and somebody pushes you, you get muscle soreness the next day.
Yeah.
You feel miserable.
Yeah.
But you're growing, and that's actually part of it.
Now, when you say dive all in, do you mean just, go to one service and leave immediately after the service and don't talk to anybody? Is that diving all
Oh,
the way in?
yeah, that's diving. No, of course not. I mean, again, go to service. Honestly, I always say, like, I remember when I was up in Wausau, Wisconsin, and it was on Facebook, and I had a buddy on Facebook, and I was like maybe a pastor for like 3 or 4 years at the time,
Hmm.
and this guy writes on there, and he says something like, you know, um, you don't fully understand preaching until you have preached every Sunday for a full year.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And I think I've talked to you about this before, but
Yes, you have.
it offended me, and I got
Yeah,
mad. And then when I got down here at St. John's, and I did that. I mean, don't get me wrong, like we had a vacation here or whatever, but like by and large, I preached every Sunday free, and I was like, oh my gosh, he's right.
yeah,
Oh my gosh, he's right. And I think the same thing is true with people. Like whenever you like go to a service and then skip like 3 weeks and go to another service and then skip like 5 weeks or whatever it happens to be, like one of the things that you end up doing is you miss the beauty of the church seasons, and you miss the message that those church seasons have to offer you,
yeah,
because they have something to offer you, and it's important for you to kind of to see that, you
yeah.
know
It
um,
is.
and so yeah, you kind of miss that. We're coming up to one of my favorite times of year. I absolutely love Holy Week. It's
Yeah.
exhausting. I'm exhausted after it's all over, but like, you know, it's it's one of my favorite times. But one of the reasons that it is one of my favorite times is because it is like so intense, but it's also like such a flowing of that season. And I just love
Hmm.
that. Just
Yeah,
absolutely love it.
yeah. Well, and I think that what one of the things that's so fun about it, or so great about it, is that it is so intense.
Yeah.
It's like I think every time I've been involved in a project, or like I don't know if have you ever, actually, I don't know if I've ever asked you this. Have you ever done like theater ever in your life?
I know this is hard to believe, but no.
I kind of didn't think so, but I thought I'd ask. But the thing, I've played so many concerts, so many gigs, all
Yeah.
these things. You will never see camaraderie more than at a musical,
Yeah.
because they practice for months and months and months together. You become really a family, and then you do these shows, and you're under the lights, it's hot, you're sweaty, you're in
Hmm.
full costume, like it's intense, it's really intense,
Yeah.
and it's just, you get so much out of it because you put so much into it.
Yeah.
and and I've played a lot of jazz combo gigs, that you show up, you set up your stuff, you play for 4 hours, and then you pack up and you go home. And it's like, I don't get anything out of that. There's no camaraderie there. It's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
you're just playing. Maybe you got paid, whatever. But I think that's the same sort of idea with Holy Week. Is like, if you go to the Wednesday night services, and then you go for Good Friday, and you do the sunrise service, or you do all these things that are sort of out of your normal routine, and it's a little more effort. It's so impactful because you just put so much into it, and you get more out of it that way.
Well, there's a truth
um,
in that. Yeah,
I
absolutely.
think, I mean, I just think you just kind of you make more of an effort around that time, because there's just more to go to if you want to go to it. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And I think I've talked to a few people recently that have kind of been chatting with me about the fact that, like, yeah, we go to a church, but we haven't really gone that often, and we're kind of skipping a lot. And
Yeah.
we go maybe like once every 2 months or something. And it's like, yeah, I mean, and then they're kind of like surprised that they're not really into it.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, yeah, because you don't go. you know,
Well,
it's
and again, I think that a lot of that takes. I mean, again, back in the day, there was so much social and peer pressure and all that kind of stuff, and all that's gone now. So I really
hmm
think, like, a younger person coming into a church, by all means, I get it. Like, they're gonna hunt around, they want to find a church that they like, that they're comfortable with, yada yada yada. That's fine.
yeah,
Make sure that reflect, but don't just reflect on their kids program. Reflect on their actual faith. What do they believe? What do you agree with? So on and so forth. But then after that, just say, I'm going to do this. I'm going to go every Sunday for 1 year.
yeah,
And again, I understand vacation comes up, this happens, that happens,
yeah,
whatever. I mean, but, like, by and large, just say, I'm going to come every single Sunday for 1 year. I'm going to get involved in stuff. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do,
yeah,
like, like, and then just do it. I
yeah,
think I think what you will find is that you get a lot out of that church, you know.
yes,
And after the
yeah,
if after the end of the year you're kind of like, well, maybe this church really isn't for me. Like, okay, but then explore that. Why isn't it for me? Because
yeah,
again, if it has to do with your faith, then okay, that's a pretty deep exploration. Let's figure this out. If it
hmm
has to do with the kids program, well, then, at least go to a church of a similar faith that maybe has a better kids program, if that's really what you're into.
hmm
Um, but make sure your faith is paramount. It's the most important. And then everything else you can kind of order and figure out as you go.
yeah, yeah, definitely. And honest, I think I definitely have had. I've definitely come around to what you're talking about now. It's like I've definitely come around to that a lot in the last probably 5 years, because I've shared before on the podcast. I've had a lot of pretty crazy experiences with churches.
Yeah.
Being a musician, I've sat in at a lot of churches. I've seen a lot of different ways people have done things. I've been burned by a few, like really, really badly. And I think, I mean, I'll be completely honest. When I started at St. John's, I really just kind of had the thought of, I'm just going to keep my head down. I'm going to do my job,
Yeah.
and just do my job, and that's it. I'm not going to, because I feel like every time I would try to get involved, I would get burned really bad.
Yeah.
And so I did that. But I think, over the, when we would do Wednesday services, and I'd sit around and talk with you,
Yeah.
and then Sundays, like, the only hard thing with Sundays is we practice before, and then um, you know we play as people are walking out. So I don't typically get to talk to a lot of people on those, just because of the nature of it. But the Wednesday services, we'd have people come in, and we just kind of get to talk a little bit beforehand, and then we talk after a little bit.
Hmm.
And it was just, yeah, I mean, it got me more to the point where I wanted to be more involved, because
Yeah.
so, and I think after doing this podcast with you, like, talking about the seasons of the church, and talking about the colors, like, why do we have these different colors, in the church on different weeks. It's really, it is so much more like it's more fun, and I get more out of it to just like actually getting involved with it, you know?
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
So, well, 30 we're at 34 minutes in according to my little clock here.
Yeah.
Do you have a question for today?
Well, I don't maybe do you want to end with your other segment, or do you want to
Well, I mean, if you got a depending on your question.
um well, I have one thing that I can ask you
Okay.
about,
All
because
right.
I recently had a friend of mine who he sent me a video clip, and
Okay.
it was a preacher talking about how in the Bible, um, you know, God call the people sometimes have to stand up and say something. Now I know we kind of have talked about this recently, but basically saying that um, you're going to say things. Their point was that sometimes you're going to have to say something that upsets people, and that's God's. God wants you to do that. Now the person, the preacher who was doing that sermon, I don't know if you want to take a guess.
Hmm. Was
Might
it
be fun.
was it Driscoll?
Yes, it was.
Ah, I got it.
Now my friend was like, you know what? I really feel like I need to start speaking up more. And I was kind of like, okay, I don't know. And I said, all I said to him was like, at the right time, yes. But and I kind of told him a story about one time at work. I was really upset about something, and I had a manager who really just said, like, well, what do you want to have happen? And when I realized I really didn't know, it was like, maybe you shouldn't say something since you don't really know what outcome you want.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, you're right. And so I didn't, and I'm glad I didn't. And so I kind of made that point to him, like, you just got to be careful, because yes, sometimes, following God, people don't like that, but also you got to be careful. And I didn't really mention the fact of who Mark Driscoll was. I
Yeah.
didn't really get into that. Well, then about a week later, he messaged me and said, I'm starting to think maybe this whole speaking up thing isn't a good idea. And I think he kind of said some things maybe at work that got him in trouble.
Oh no.
And so my question to you is, what's kind of your thoughts as far as like, what does the Bible say about, especially with the idea of like sometimes you're just going to upset people by the way you say things. Is that really something you hear, like you see in the Bible, God saying like, yeah, just speak up, and sometimes you'll upset people, but it's okay? Or what's your thoughts?
Well, I mean, again, we're given a lot of examples throughout Scripture. We're given a lot of discussion items to kind of talk about and kind of think about. Um, by and large, when you kind of go through Scripture, you see a lot of people that will speak up, and kind of like you said, when the time is right, in the right, in the right element,
Mm-hmm.
because again, look, it's like this. It's kind of like this. Paul was a Roman citizen. And being a Roman citizen afforded him a lot of rights that he would not normally have had being if he was a non-Roman citizen. Now, for those of you that don't know, he was a Roman citizen because he was from a place called Tarsus. Tarsus were the tent makers for Roman soldiers.
Oh wow, okay.
And so Roman citizenship was a big deal. Like only people born in Rome were given Roman citizenship with the exception of Tarsus.
Mm.
Tarsus was also given Roman citizenship
Oh wow,
by
okay.
birth. Um, and so, that afforded him a lot of rights. I mean, a lot of rights. You did not just mess with a Roman citizen. You had to be very sure of yourself.
And just sorry, not to interrupt you, but like, was it? Do you know if it was pretty clear that like he was full fledged Roman? There was no like, oh well, they're Roman, but they're from Tarsus.
No, no, no. It was full fledged.
Full
It,
fledged.
it
Okay,
was one of
yeah,
the privileges of being a tent maker
yeah,
um,
okay.
in Tarsus. So anyway, so the thing is, though, is if you go back through Holy Scripture and you look at all the times that Paul is arrested or beaten or whatever, you start to ask yourself, well, okay, when did Paul actually tell people that he was a Roman citizen? Because he doesn't all the time. Sometimes
Yeah.
he just takes the beating,
Wow.
and it's like he doesn't even care. However, what's really interesting is like Paul will tell people he's a Roman citizen whenever he has an opportunity to proclaim the gospel. So if he's just been arrested and he's hauled off to jail, he probably won't say anything. If there's a
Yeah.
crowd of people at the door, though, he'll say something, because then
Yeah.
he can go outside the door and he can actually proclaim the gospel. Whereas if he can't, he won't do it. Again, he'll just take the beating. It isn't about the pain. It isn't about the punishment. It isn't about him trying to get out of something. It is strictly about, making sure that he times it correctly for when
Yeah.
the gospel is to be proclaimed. And I think that's something that for us we can do as well. I think it's important to step up. I think it's important to say something. I think you're right on the money. Like, right, like you should know kind of deep down, what this is really all about. And I think
Yeah.
some of that takes a little soul searching on our end. I mean, a lot of times we just attack people because we don't like X, Y, and Z, and
Yeah.
that's not good. We need to
Mhm.
handle some of our own, dare I say, insecurities. I know I'm getting all like psychological and stuff, but like the
Oh,
truth
yeah.
is that we all carry with us some like some insecurities that we have.
Yeah.
We don't want certain things to happen. And, if you're going to proclaim the gospel message, it can't be about that. You know, you can't be proclaiming the gospel message because you want to be uninvited to the birthday party because it's irritating and you don't like that one guy. You know,
Yeah.
your proclamation of the gospel needs to be about the gospel, and it needs to be about, telling your brother or sister the truth of God's love. And I think that's actually a really important thing. So, you come into the foreground of some of the things that are going on right now, like, in terms of like, should you go out on the street and preach? And I always tell people, no. Like, I mean, don't get me wrong. There's street preachers out there. Every now and again, they strike a chord with somebody. Hey, God
Yeah.
bless them. I hope that it's great. But I mean, if you really want to evangelize, it's hard work,
Yeah.
because to evangelize, you kind of have to put yourself second and your own needs and wants second. And you kind of have to say, look, I'm going to be a friend with this very uncomfortable person.
Yeah.
And I'm going to show them that they are worth something, and I'm going to be their friend. And guess what? If they reject Christ, I'm still going to be their friend. And
Yeah.
that's really, really hard. It's really, really
Yeah.
easy when we all agree on the fundamentals. But what happens whenever they disagree on a fundamental?
Mhm.
That's really hard, but that's who we're evangelizing to, right? We're
Yeah.
evangelizing to the person who disagrees with us, and sometimes in very big ways. And
Mhm.
so, yeah, that's kind of where I go with that, is like, and so again, like in terms of like, your friend or somebody else, like, are there times to stand up? Absolutely. When somebody is getting abused, when you yourself are getting abused in a form that hurts you, either psychologically or physically, um, you should most definitely stand up and kind of say something.
Yeah.
If you find yourself in a situation that you feel like you can kind of correct some scenario, you're at work, you feel like things are done and maybe not the best of ways, judge for yourself. But ultimately, your goal there is to hopefully fix what's wrong. And so don't do it in an obnoxious way, because you won't get anything that way.
Yeah.
So I mean, again, these are all like, now that's all like just random insights. But in terms of like speaking up in favor of God, I'd say just, know your audience and try your best to get your timing right. And,
Yeah.
and by the way, we're sinners. We're not going to get it perfect. And there will be times when we offend people, and that happens.
Mhm.
Like, I'm not saying we won't, or, whatever, but I'm just saying, we should try not necessarily to be offensive unless we absolutely have to. But there
Yeah.
will be times, I think, when we will need to be offensive. When everybody around us says, no, you have to do this. And we'll go, no, you know,
Yeah.
beat me, hit me, kill me, whatever. I'm not going to do it, you
Yeah.
know, but again, that's, you know, so yeah, I think there's some pluses and minuses to it. There's definitely some times to stand up. Um,
Mhm.
and you and I both kind of talked a little bit about, Mark Driscoll, of course, the podcast, but also on top of that,
Yes.
like, he's starting to gain steam again, I've noticed.
Yeah, he
Um,
is. Yep.
you know, um, and he gained steam after he went to this like men's retreat, and they had all kinds of weird stuff, and he kind of called him out for it. And to be honest with you, though, that was a time when I actually agreed with Driscoll. I
Mhm.
again, I don't want to sit
Yeah.
here and say I always agree with him. I don't. He's actually done some really awful stuff. But this is
Mhm.
one of those scenarios where I did agree with him. Um,
Yeah.
they
Yeah,
did
and
something very, very public, and they did it in the name of Jesus. And he
Yeah.
kind of called them out for both, and it needed to be. And it couldn't be, the guy, the preacher that was running the event was like, Matthew 18, Matthew 18. And basically what he was saying is, don't call me out in public. But the problem is that he did that in public. And so the
Yeah.
public that were gathered there needed to know that that was not okay. And so this is one of those cases where I actually agreed with Mark Driscoll. I
Yeah.
don't always, and
Right.
you
Well,
know,
yeah, and it's honestly hard because he, like you said, he is gaining a lot of steam right now. And as we've talked before, the thing is he's really good at taking a nugget of truth and then turning that into something um far beyond the truth.
yes,
And
yes,
that's what's so hard. And he pops up a lot now, like on YouTube and
yep,
different
yep,
shorts and different things. And it's really hard because it's like, man, I know I know this guy's history,
hmm,
I know what he did. I know the things he said. I know the people that, were hurt by him
yeah,
and some of these things. And so it's really hard to really take anything he says, um, seriously or to heart, because it's like I just can't trust that, whatever he's saying. It's like, I got to be really, really skeptical, or I'm really skeptical, you know? Um, I hope that if he really does read his Bible, and he hopefully does have, some actual strong faith and all that. So I hope that, yeah, in that instance, yeah, you agreed with him, and I agreed with that too. But hopefully, I don't know. Hopefully, he does have, he. I don't know how to say it, but I hope he does, really truly want to follow God.
yeah.
Um, but sometimes it can be hard when you know some of the past of some people. But again, we're all
But
sinners.
you hope
So
that he is repentant of his past, because
yes,
I personally don't think he should be, a pastor anywhere after, all the stuff that he's done. But that being said, obviously I don't get a say in that. And since people are
right,
going to be following him, I do hope and I do pray that he follows the scriptures, he follows God, and I hope that he is repentant of what he has done as he moves forward. Because again, I'd hate to see
yeah,
him repeat himself and hurt so many people.
yeah, me too.
So
Yeah,
yeah, there we go.
there we go.
All right. Are
Our,
we ready for our new segment?
I'm ready.
All right, here we go. Ready? And now, life and times of the saints. All right, so picture this.
All right,
It's the 11th century. The 11th century. And the church
love it.
is, well, it's a bit of a mess. You got to remember, in 1054, the Great Schism happened. And the Church Catholic, that would be the Western side, was in the middle of picking itself up.
Mm.
Enter Hugh, a young man from a place called Chateauneuf. At least I think I'm pronouncing that correctly, France.
Oh,
Now, Hugh wasn't your average guy. He had a knack for theology. He had a heart full of faith. His dad, Odilo, was a soldier who later actually became a monk, inspired by his son's devotion. In 1080, Hugh was elected Bishop of Grenoble. But here's the kicker. He wasn't even ordained yet. You want to be talk about getting thrown into the deep end. The diocese was in shambles, but Hugh, with his unwavering commitment to reform, more specifically the Gregorian reforms as they were called, he rolled up his sleeves and he got to work. He was actually ordained by none other than, at least the Pope at the time, Pope Gregory VII. Now, Hugh's time as a bishop wasn't all smooth sailing. He had a long-standing feud with one of the counts over church lands. And after years of back and forth, they finally reached an agreement in 1099. Hugh handed over temporal authority to the count, but managed to reclaim the disputed territories. But that's not all. In 1084, a man named Bruno of Cologne and his six companions showed up looking for a place to live, a life of prayer and study. Hugh found them a remote spot in the Alps called Chartreuse, and just like that, the Carthusian order was born. Now, despite his success, Hugh often felt the weight of his responsibilities. He even tried to resign. He wanted so desperately to join a monastery, but the Pope and others had other plans. Hugh's humility and dedication didn't go unnoticed. He was canonized in 1134. That's where they declared him a saint, just 2 years after his death. His death, April 1st, 1132. That is his feast day on April 1st, fitting for a man who dedicated his life to his faith and to his flock. All right. So there you go. You have St. Hugh of Grenoble.
St. Hugh.
Yeah. So, to give you a little bit more history, I know I have my little paragraph thing and all that kind of stuff, but to give you a little bit more history, again, he was born in 1053. In 1054, like 1 year after he was born, there's this massive divide in the church, and it's what's going to divide the West from the East, or the Greek Orthodox from the Roman Catholics. And so this great thing happens, and the church is just kind of left in a state of shambles, and there's all kinds of bad stuff that's kind of floating around at the time. And so this Pope Gregory VII, he decides that he's going to kind of fix it, and he basically Hugh was obviously, going to church all the time, very faithful man. And Gregory kind of saw that and said, "Hey, this is the guy I want." And so they forced him into a bishopry. Now that's actually, believe it or not, that's actually not as uncommon as it sounds. We can go back and talk about Saint Augustine sometime, and like Saint Ambrose. Like Saint Ambrose, they almost like kidnapped. It was crazy.
Yeah.
So anyways, like it seems crazy to us, but it wasn't that terrible. But he wanted Hugh ultimately to basically put in force these reformations, the Gregorian reformations, if you will, and a lot of them had to do with like getting rid of simony. And for those of you that don't know what simony is, it comes from the scriptures where Simon is trying to purchase from Peter, special powers. He sees Peter doing these things, and so he tries to buy them, and then they kind of curse him. And so that's kind of, they call it simony, and basically it means that you're trying to basically purchase your faith. And so what these guys were doing is they were trying to purchase church positions.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. So they would go there and they'd say, well, this gives us a lot of political affluence. Let's purchase it, and so on and so forth. Now the Gregorian Reformation is actually going to slow these things down, but it's never going to quite put a full stop to them. So some of it is still going to happen underneath the table. But at the same time, like it's still like, this actually helps quite a bit. The other thing that was kind of a big deal, and this is actually really interesting too, and that was church or priestly celibacy. Earlier on, one of the popes declared that a priest going into the priesthood or monastery should be celibate. However, they made like some exemptions. So like, what happens if you were already married, and you decided to become a priest? Well, in that case, It was okay. There were some other, church areas that were like further north or so on and so forth, where marriage was, especially in the rural areas, marriage was still like very fine, was very well known and done. And the priest, and who cares? Some of the priests had great families. But this particular pope wanted to really establish that. And so that's part of his reformations. He kind of said, no, let's start making celibacy a lot more of a mandate. Now, believe it or not, some of those exceptions still do technically exist, but you just don't hear about them very much. Especially after this. So anyway, so just to put a little bit of tidbits of history kind of going on there, everything's kind of in shambles. The church is kind of rebuilding itself. They've kind of had a bad go of it, especially with the two high bishops basically excommunicating each other. That's what happened with the Great Schism. And so in the midst of it, this guy was basically leading the way in terms of trying to help reform the church, to make it more godly and more God pleasing. And so, yeah, so there you go. St. Hugh of Grenoble. He was a French guy.
Yeah.
So anyway,
April 1st.
Yep, that's today. Yeah. Well, of course, when we're recording this, that's
when
it is.
Yeah.
So yep, that's the guy I went with.
That's pretty interesting.
Mm-hmm. Now,
yeah.
I forgot to mention this because I like in my little thing, it talked about how he had a feud with this count over land. Well, that was another one of the big debates that they were trying to do, because a lot of the areas basically started buying up the land of the church, and they were doing that to hold political power. And so, but they didn't. The church didn't necessarily like that, because then the politicians would basically try to rule over the church. And so realize like what he did, and this is notice the agreement was 1099, and the agreement was basically the temporal authority goes to the count, but the land is owned by the church. And so that was kind of their like way to, compromise, I guess you'd say.
Oh, yeah.
So
interesting.
Yeah, I think so. Fascinating stuff. Lots of like little tidbits of church history, in there.
I like this. I mean, I think it's just very interesting. I don't know. I mean, like I said, I never, or I've said before, my church never talked about saints. They almost even viewed saints as a very taboo, like, oh, we don't celebrate saints. That's just like, that's a Catholic thing,
Mm-hmm.
And so it's interesting to hear some of this stuff. And again, as we talked about earlier, it's like the more you dive in, even looking at some of the saints, it's just interesting. It's the more you dive in, the more you get out of it. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. No, this is a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. So
yeah.
So anyway, there you go. It's fun. It's good times. Again, still working on my writing style and everything, and having.
Hey, it sounds good. You do need to take those clips though, and like keep the your little clip of that, so you can play those for certain things. Put a little, you got some music behind it and stuff. You gotta do that. And
Oh, and I should tell you this. I found out the podcast. Well, no, that's the software that we're using right now to run this podcast. But I should tell you, they have AI voices.
Oh, yeah.
And some of them are pretty good.
Yeah.
And so I'm definitely going to have some fun with that. Oh, we're going to have a good time.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Well, we've done we only have one segment left, and we've done, we're still just under an hour. We're doing pretty good.
Yeah, our timing is impeccable.
Yeah, we've been crushing it. I don't know, hopefully the conversations all flow and make sense to people, but we're, we're doing great on time.
Yeah, we're doing awesome on time. Oh, man. So does that mean we're ready?
I think we're ready
for church.
I'm just going to mumble.
I still say I'm going to go find a clip of that and just record it so I can do it all the time. We need to get on that anyway. So anyway, so the big news around here, of course, is the potato bar. Okay, that's just me. No, the potato bar is, we're continuing with our Lenten services. We have this Wednesday and next Wednesday, and then after that, we are jetting into Holy Week, and we just can't wait for it. I know I can't. I'm always excited about it. But anyway, so we're doing the meal this week is a potato bar put on by the youth. The youth are preparing for the National Youth Gathering, so it's super exciting. So yeah, I mean, I know that's kind of the big thing, kind of looking forward to. Of course, I'm getting married, so that's exciting. Handed out some invitations on Sunday.
Yeah, I think that might be a little more a bigger thing than the potato bar, but
I don't know. Potato bars are good.
They are good. That's true.
But we're doing a pretty low key wedding. It's May 16th. It's gonna be out in the field. Beside the parsonage, if you know where the church is at. It's going to be great. We're doing it at 7:30 at night. We're trying to catch that sunset. We're hoping the weather permits it. But then
Yeah.
after that, we're planning a bonfire, man. We're planning a bonfire. Let's
Yeah.
get some hot dogs. Let's get some, keep it low key. Like I said, I
Hmm.
think these couples, they get it all wrong nowadays. They go around, they spend like $100 million. At least it feels like it.
Yeah.
And I know that's not real, but like they're still spending in the tens of thousands of dollars.
Oh, yeah. No, they definitely are.
And
Yeah.
it's like, dude, like, man, get some hot dogs, have a bonfire, you know, whatever. It'll be
Yeah.
great. So
Yeah. Don't go too grand. Just build a gigantic bonfire that's gonna be, seen from space.
that's right. Elon Musk
Yeah.
is gonna be like, "Did you set that bonfire?" I'm gonna be like, "Yes, I did.
Yes, I did.
Yes, I did." So,
I mean,
anyway, so that's going on in my neck of the woods. What's happening over in your area?
well, we're down to I think this is week 5 or 4 of we're waiting on an answer
Okay, then I was
from our
just gonna
pastor.
ask. I was just because like
Uh
a lot of people are curious over in this direction.
yes, yeah, so I was gone this past Sunday. Um and so I was gone this past Sunday, and when I came back, I kind of was like, hey, or not this past Sunday, 2 Sundays ago. So this past Sunday, I was kind of like, anything get said or brought
Yeah,
up or any
yeah,
announcements? And everybody's like, no. And I'm like, there's no answer yet? And they're like, oh, no, there isn't. And I'm like, wow, okay, well, we're getting down to like 4 or 5 weeks now. And it's like, at this point, it's like, I mean, I would assume he's really, really considering, or really thinking through it, because
yeah.
at this point, after that much time, I would think that, if he was really sure, no, it's indefinite no, I think we probably would have heard by now. Not to say that it's definitely a yes, but
No, but I mean,
at
again,
least,
at least he's putting prayerful thought into it.
yeah, I
Absolutely.
I think he definitely is, and he's a very nice guy. I might have said the other week that I talked to him on the phone for about 50 minutes, and he was very nice, really really nice guy, and um, you know, I'm sure you've had plenty of experiences too. It's like, yeah, he seems like he would be really great, and so you kind of you start hoping and praying, but of course, the church he's at definitely is probably benefiting from him being there too. So it's
Yeah.
just we'll see. We'll see, So I think most likely, I'm assuming we'll have an answer on Sunday, but if we don't, then I guess is there, we did a whole episode about taking calls and stuff, but
Mhm.
is there, I mean, I know there's generally like a probably not what's the right word? Not common, like not a
Timeline?
rule, but a general rule of thumb.
Yeah. Yeah,
Is that
yeah,
the
yeah.
right way to say that? Typically, it's about a month,
Yeah.
to
I
like give
usually
an
say about
answer.
4 to 6 weeks, but I know
Oh,
this guy
okay.
was, like, sick or something, wasn't he, for a while?
Mm. Yeah, there were some medical things that I think happened. So
Yeah.
yeah, so we're that's also kind of to be considered as well. But yeah, so we'll see. Everybody's very hopeful.
Yeah.
It is definitely a strange thing though, because we've had a handful of calls be returned. Um,
Mhm.
since I've been there this year, and it really, you can tell when they announce it. Man, you can just tell the morale really goes down,
Yeah.
and they're
Yeah.
really hoping. So yeah,
Yeah.
so that's really all that's happening um, in
Alright.
our neck of the woods. Yeah,
Alright. Well, then I think that just sums up we see, I need an ending sound too. Like,
yeah, we do.
we do. We do. I got a cat. Oh, oh, I got a dog too.
There you go.
I play too much with the sound effects. It's okay. But anyway, all right. Well, that's all the time that we have for this evening. I hope this finds you well. God's blessings, everybody, and good night.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye.